Hello and welcome, everyone. We'll give others a few moments to join before we kick things off today, but thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with us. In 10 more seconds, we'll get things kicked off. Thank you for your patience. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get things rolling. To those that are participating with us today, thank you. Thank you for investing your time. Today's session, as you'll see on screen, we intend to focus on the benefits of harnessing the power of audit consolidation. Now, with us today, we have some very, very special guests. First of all, to introduce myself, I'm Patrick Sullivan. Joining me from A-LIGN, we also have our Director of ISO Services, Emily Schuckman. Em, thank you. We have a very, very valued partner, Christopher Z from CyberData Pros. We also have joining us a customer to represent the customer perspective in Juan Carlos Gonzalez from Fusion RM. Chris, M, Juan Carlos, thank you all again so much for making space to join us today. Now, as we discussed, the goal of today's dialogue is to really work through the power of audit consolidation. But one of the things that we want you to walk out of today with is the understanding that consolidation is so much more than just controls. Many organizations have an idea that if you can, in a very intelligent way, map various standards controls in a spreadsheet, that you'll have everything you need to be successful as it relates to building a compliance program, and then assessing and offering attestation, certification, and assurance reports on the back end. What we really want you to understand, and where the bulk of today's dialogue will rest, is in helping you understand that in reality, your compliance program will be built through partnerships. Now, partnership can kind of be this loosely defined idea. So for us, we recognize partnerships are the ability to create value through shared resources. Some of yours, some of mine, we work together to create the desired outcome that helps everyone be successful. And what we hope to really highlight today, again, through the dialogue with Chris, Juan Carlos, and M, is just how important the partners you choose will be in ensuring your overall success in building and then again certifying your compliance programs. Now, that said, to turn off the slide deck, apologies, so that it should just be us on screen. There we are. Juan Carlos, if I could start with you, and for the audience, if you could just share your perspective of the benefit of working with a partner organization like CyberData Pros. How did CyberData Pros help, in some cases, fundamentally change your approach to your compliance program?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's of the utmost importance, and I'll expound on that. Joining Fusion maybe a little over a year and a half ago, I came into this new function, right? I had the responsibility of creating a robust compliance program. And when you join a new an organization for the first time, you find yourself trying to get your bearings straight, understanding the product, understanding the organization, understanding where the gaps are. And one of the things that I found to be extremely helpful in working with a partner organization like CyberData Pros is the ability for them to come in a way, be my partner in doing that discovery.
Yes.
Right. Like you talked about the importance of having partnerships and building trust and, working together. And that's exactly what they did. They were able to join me on calls. They were able to help me scope out my program, my compliance program, help me to understand some of the obligations that we have in order to meet the requirements of all the various ISO certifications that we were seeking to obtain. And so from a customer perspective, absolutely pivotal, right? They, in addition to that, held me accountable in a lot of different ways, right? I'm kind of in the deep end of the
Yeah.
pool, right? I joined and it was like, here's this program, run and build it. And while I'm trying to figure all of that out, they're able to, essentially stand side by side with me and then say, all right, you're getting too much in the weeds right now. Let's pull back a little bit. This is what's actually the most important part of building or the most important parts of building your program.
Yeah.
So in that way, I found that to be an invaluable resource.
And that's incredible. As I think about it from a certification body, a CB's perspective, in many ways, we have to remain largely objective. We have to remain impartial. And so we can tell a story as it relates to what building a management system might look like, but we can't tell your story. And that's where Data Pros really excels in partnering with organizations to prepare them. And so, Chris Z, what does that even look like for you, stepping into a partner organization?
So in many different ways, right? When we work with, especially when we work with you all, A-LIGN, and we get a client like Fusion, we go kind of going dark. We don't know what their organization is. We know they're like, I don't know, they do this, they do marketing, they do, Fusion did risk management, right? So we know that, but I don't know what they're all about. So what I like to do first is I like to start with the internal audit and really get a feel for what apps they have and what their organization is about, because that really tells me what the organization is about. Is all those controls, those ISO controls, and we go line by line of what they have and what they don't have, and that way it gives me an idea of what we really need to work on. So and then I develop a plan according to, after the internal audit, of what we need to accomplish.
And then, not to put you on the spot, but from an ISO certification perspective, an assessment and certification perspective, do you see that those organizations that work with advisory partners like CyberData Pros are actually more prepared at time of external audit?
For sure. I think that there's a pretty big difference for companies that come in that have never done ISO. They might not even have the standard yet, and they want to get started and they think, oh, it should be easy. But there's a lot to it, right? It's not just a standard, it's implementing and building out an actual management system. And so I think that's where having somebody like CyberData is so extremely helpful, because one, they're going to help you get your scope set up correctly from the beginning, right? Which is huge. And then they can really make sure that you're hitting every aspect of it. And yet those audits will always be more successful, in my opinion, because they just have a better sense of what's going on, and they help companies really get there, like Fusion. So it's great for us when we see a partner involved, because we know that it'll be set up correctly from the beginning.
Yes. And really what I feel you hinting at is this idea of trust. We tend to have a higher sense of trust in instances where partners are working with customer organizations. Juan Carlos, Chris, as we prepped for this session today, that was an area that we all felt was really, really important, was, the reality then that in the presence of high trust, speed goes up and cost goes down, because there's less back and forth and less revisiting concepts to be sure that we're sure. I know you two had shared with them and I how well you communicate, and you felt that communication was part of your overall success. I don't know if you care to share a little bit about kind of what that looks like to actually work together to create this management system.
Go ahead, Juan Carlos. Yeah, you start and I'll tag in. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think from Pat, this is maybe the third or fourth time Patrick has mentioned trust, right? And I don't think it's just lip service. I don't think it's just this abstract concept that we have to keep in mind. It's something that you actually have to build if you're partnering with somebody, right? And from my perspective, I take that very serious. I mean, this is my entire livelihood. This is my job. And part of that job is building relationships across the organization as I implement a compliance program, right? But it's also building relationships with our auditors, right? With our partners like CyberData Pros. And one of the ways that I found to do that, and it's a two-way street. So Chris is also willing to engage, but it's just having open and direct communication, right? A lot of this, especially if you're tackling audit for the first time, it can be a little daunting. There are a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
There is a lot that you have to do. And having someone there who you can bounce ideas off of, or who can clarify a concept that you're unfamiliar with is great. So some of the ways that CyberData Pros help specifically is, we use Slack and they use Slack, and they offered, hey, let's just have a channel, just kind of constant open communication. And I think that was great, because it allowed me, I'm working throughout the day. I can't always say, hey, do you have 30 minutes a week from now, right? I'm trying to get stuff sometimes on a daily basis. And so being able to say, hey, Chris, quick question, and he responds in the next handful of minutes, it's fantastic. It keeps the ball rolling, right? So that's how I built trust. I knew that he was there for me and was able to help me build out my program. So having an open line of communication, and then also just being able to provide a lot of the guidance that we needed. Sometimes, once again, if you're doing this for the first time, you don't have everything that you need to be successful. It's very difficult to say, I'm going to build out a compliance program. What policies do I need? What language should even be in those policies? You start thinking about it from a clean slate perspective, and all of a sudden you're just underwater. It's very difficult to start from zero. And so CyberData Pros came in and they had their policy templates. And the more they got to know us, the more they were able to even tailor some of the language within there and give me a good starting point to have a solid set of policies, procedures, statement of applicability template, anything you can think of, right? This is what they do. And so we were able to kind of go off of each other and build that trust very quickly, because, hey, this is my job. Chris appreciated that this is my job. I don't want to lose my job. I want to do this the right way, and he wants to help me do it the right way. And so I think we were aligned very much there. So yeah, Chris, what are your thoughts?
I have to agree with that, though. I don't want to lose my job either, but I also don't want you to fail. I don't want you to fail. We're going to do, when we're in this together, we're going to succeed together. And I think that with the open communication of what Juan and his team and my team had with Slack, and Juan Carlos would be like, hey, would you get on a quick call real quick on Slack? Sure, no problem. Quick call. We talked about security controls and how to make the policy work for their organization.
Yeah.
In fact, we hopped on a Slack call this morning. So
this morning we're on a huddle.
It's very real. Yeah. I mean, we were on a call this morning, impromptu. So it's still, after working together for a year and a half, we're still having these random calls.
Yeah. And we're on surveillance year, ISO audit. So it just goes full circle. Let's do it. We're in this together. Let's succeed again. Yeah.
And then from ISO, go ahead, Em. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say real quick, Patrick, I think one thing too, from our perspective, that's great for, with CyberData Pros is really the fact that you guys, it's not just checking a box for Fusion, right? But you're really understanding their environment and not just taking the template and plugging and playing, but actually using it as a starting point, but then modifying it to what their environment is. And that's not something that you always see with some of the other folks out there. So I think that's been a great thing from our perspective as well.
And that's exactly.
Sorry, Patrick. You go ahead.
No, please.
No, I mean, I'll just go back to ISO standard on continual improvement, right?
Yeah.
Continual improvement. You got to
Yep.
continuously improve your structure, your security structure.
Sure.
And that's what, we're all about, and what Fusion's all about. So we're at the end goal, we're towards that same goal at the end. Yep.
Yeah,
And I no, sorry, Patrick.
please, this is incredible. Go, Em.
No, I think that's such a great point, Chris, because the continual improvement is such a foundational piece of the ISO standard that sometimes we do get clients that come in and they think, oh, we want no findings, right? We've got to have a clean audit. I'm like, but the findings aren't meant to be, you missed this part. It really is meant to, this is how your system can be better, right? And so I think if you go in with that perspective of the continual improvement, it really does set you up for success, because it's meant to be a value add while getting certified, So yeah, I think it's a great point.
And Emily, I'll just kind of riff off of that, because I think that's such a great thing to let your management know, right? If you're in my role, you're building out a compliance program. It's not just about clean reports, no findings, perfect program. Those don't exist. It's impossible for that to exist using the ISO frameworks, right? Sure. And I always communicate that when we have our quarterly steering committee meetings, which is an ISO requirement, which is, look, it's very likely that we'll have findings, and more significant findings up front. But the idea is, and you should all know that 10 years from now, if we're still going after these ISO certifications, our auditors will continue to find ways for us to use.
Yes.
And there is never, and I think it's very important to make that very clear. There will never be a year where you have nothing, right? Where you've like this gold standard program. There's never any room for improvement.
Nope.
And anyway, I'm just glad you mentioned that, because I think it's worth noting. And I keep saying this: if this is your first time doing this, that is a great thing to bring to the forefront of your leaders' vision of what a program should be.
Yeah,
for sure.
And for those that this is the first time that you've heard any discussion around ISO 27001, 27701, the important concept to remember here that everyone in the session is describing is something that ISO refers to as the Deming loop or Deming cycle, wherein your management system will be built around an iterative loop of plan, do, check, act. So plan your system, implement it, and then continuously check it. And when you find that you need to apply either balancing or reinforcing feedback, you apply that feedback so that you can bring your system back into conformity with your business goals. That is one of the important things that organizations need to understand, is that ISO 27001 or any of their management systems aren't meant to be hindrances to your value creation. They're meant to support your value creation. And therefore, every ISO management system is really going to start with two critical steps: understand your scoping and understanding your context. That is, based on what this management system is covering, what does it look like for me in the overall ecosystem? Where do I really play here? What's applicable to me? Those two things then inform everything else that you do as you build your management system. And Chris Z, this is kind of a back and forth iterative process that you have to work through with your customers as you begin learning what it is that they intend to do, how they intend to align their management systems with their business goals. How do you do that, man? Where do you even start?
Scoping's hard. Yeah, even scoping a project, something like Fusion can be difficult sometimes, because you don't know their systems. You don't know, are they cloud? Do they have an MDM? Do they have all these components, right? Security components. Do they have them in place? And we don't know until we go in, right? So, I mean, it's just starting off with a plan and just having weekly calls. I think Juan Carlos can attest to this. We had weekly calls at first, and just communicating and saying, all right, let's see what we're going to go through today. Okay, what are we going to go through the scoping? Okay, we want your application. Yep, your application's in scope. Your infrastructure's in scope. What's out of scope? Let's see what's out of scope, so we don't have to So we can forget about it almost. We can just say, no, it's out of scope. It's not applicable. We don't have to worry about it. So let's not worry about it. Let's work on the important things. So, and then I tailor the plan, and we just tailor. It's nice working with Juan Carlos because we just tailor the plan together. I'll send him something. He's like, okay, let's do that. And I'll plan like the ISO events, and I'll be like, hey, does this look good? He'll be like, yep, I changed a few things. It's all about communication. It really is.
And then Juan Carlos, I have to ask, when you came into this, you were a master of scoping. I mean, what did that mean to you?
Yeah, it's I'll go back to my when I first started kind of in these roles, right? The very first time I underwent audit, we're having these conversations like scoping, and I remember being absolutely lost. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, what do you mean, a scope of my program? I don't know, right? Like, and it's in that moment that you're like, I sure wish I had somebody I can talk to about this.
Yep.
Now, I'll say it has gotten easier over time for me to just say, okay, this is what's in scope and whatnot, but there's always something to refine. But I think that is the value, once again, right, of having a trusted partner, somebody, if it had been my first audit and I had someone like Chris Z, that would have been a lifesaver for me at the time, because I would have said, hey, Chris, don't tell my boss. I don't really know what scoping is. Can you help me, please? Right. And he would have told me, and I would have gone into my meeting like super confident, knowing exactly what I'm talking about. But, all jokes aside, it really is having the ability to have that back and forth, right? Yeah. And sometimes you don't know what you should include in your scope or what you should exclude from your scope. And so someone like CyberData Pros on your side can really help refine that process and just narrow it to exactly what you want it to be. Yep. And so from my perspective, we keep saying the same thing over and over, but it's for valid reason. All right, which is you need to have a good partner and you need to have trust in their ability as well. Yep. Right. And so when I call Chris, it's not because I don't trust him. I call him because I trust him, because I know that he knows what he's talking about. And there's something comforting about that, right?
Yes. Yeah. And from a certification body perspective, how fundamentally different is it to walk into an assessment and recognize that scoping has been done well versus very poorly?
Yeah, no, it makes a huge impact for a lot of reasons. But I will say, I do think sometimes we see this misconception that companies just want to include everything, right? It's almost over scoping. Yep. And so they think I have to include every department and every person, and not really understanding the point of, no, you just wanted to focus on your management system and who's supporting that management system. And so for us, and sometimes we see the reverse of that, where they've made it so small that we start to recognize, okay, no, you actually should include some of these other departments, and then it's a different conversation. But it is pretty noticeable from our end that we can tell, okay, you understood the scoping versus not. And we also try to coach, our sales team too, when you're talking to customers, if there's any red flags, right, that maybe they're not ready, the company's not ready, or they haven't fully implemented a management system, our first suggestion is you've got to get a partner, right? You need to find somebody like CyberData Pros that can actually help you scope. So while we'd love to sell it today, you probably need to take 6 months and go get everything put together and then come back when you're ready, because otherwise it just sets them up for failure, and that's the last thing that we want, because it just feels like wasted time and effort on both ends. So yes, scoping is huge. So I think, Chris, the approach that you guys take is really beneficial for companies, so that they're not losing time by taking steps backwards and trying to jump in too quickly.
And you do see that, Emily, and I see it a lot too. They'll be like, clients will come back to us and be like, hey, they told us we don't have an ISMS, or we don't have a policy, and they told us, hey, to call you guys. That's what we're here for. It's that partnership. Absolutely.
And I think one of the most valuable things about this whole audit process, compliance program building process is that for once, every party wants to see you succeed.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And that is, Emily, I think there's something to be said about when people think of sales teams, it's overly aggressive tactics. I need to close this deal. I don't care if you know how to use my product or not. I just want to sell it to you. And in this case, it's in your best interest as an organization to recognize, right, that, hey, maybe you're not quite where you need to be here.
Yep.
Because it reflects poorly on you. It reflects poorly on, a partner. They didn't set you up. It reflects poorly on me, the customer. If I'm promising to, to my leadership that I'm going to have a compliance program and I failed.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think, for anyone who's doing this for the first time or second time or third time or 100th time, that's a comforting thought, right? Because you can go to people and say, hey, my partners and my auditors and everyone I'm working with here, they want me to succeed. Because if we don't, this is bad for all of us.
All of us.
And I think that is
full agreement there.
That is such a great thing because you rarely see that, right? Most times there's, if you're playing sports, it's like one of the teams you're like, I want that team to lose, right? I don't care. This is my team or whatever, right? But here everyone's on the same team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talked about trust a few times. Stephen M. R. Covey has written a book called The Speed of Trust. For those listening, check it out. It's worth the read. But he outlines that trust is a function of character and competence. Character being made up of integrity and intent. Competence being made up of capabilities and results. And so for those listening, that really is the challenge, to do due diligence, to find partners from an advisory perspective and an audit perspective that actually have the intent of ensuring that you're successful. If your relationship with your auditor is one of good cop, bad cop, that's probably not the best relationship to be in, probably not the most productive relationship to be in. Keep shopping. You will find partners that will ensure that you're creating value. Again, creating value via shared resources is the whole point of partnership. Now, guys, we've talked a lot about what it looks like for building the relationship between CyberData Pros and Fusion RM and A-LIGN, for that matter, this kind of three-legged stool of customer advisory partner certification body, as it relates to assessing a single management system. Most organizations we deal with, however, are working with, in some instances, multiple management systems or multiple frameworks that they intend to have assessed and either attested, authorized, or certified. Chris Z, I think we've got our perspective of what this should look like. But from a boots on the ground perspective, how on earth do you even begin peeling back the layers of that onion?
A team. I had a really good team. So I get a call from Juan Carlos. Just a quick story. I get a call from Juan Carlos, and he goes, hey, just talk to my management team. They want to do 27701, and they're looking to do ISO 42001 once that's accredited. And I said, okay, man, let's do it. Let's go. So I got on the phone with Juan Carlos and Charles, and then of course my boss, Chris Arundel, and we just talked through what scoping looked like and what things would look like going forward. And then we brought in some of my team, and I'll just shout them out, Alex and Kylie and Anthony, and they helped me. They helped me with privacy. Alex handled the privacy. Anthony and I and Leah at the time handled ISO 42001. It was great. And then we went back to Juan Carlos with tailored policies and procedures to what their organization looked like. So again, I had a great team in the background helping out for Fusion RM.
And then Juan Carlos, from your perspective, I mean, how did this thing play out? I mean, was it seamless? Was it a bumpy road?
Yeah, I think it was I would say it was as seamless as it could have been,
Yeah.
right? Knowing that there's always going to be some wrinkles in there that you have to, work through. But I think it was an interesting project because one of the things I was tasked with was how do you make this one program, right? Because for those of you that maybe are listening and aren't too familiar, you have ISO 27001, which is your information security management system. And in addition to that is 27701, which is a privacy edition. So it's just a few extra things you have to do. Then you have ISO 42001, which is a totally separate standalone AI management system. And, I remember one of the very first questions I asked Chris is, oh man, do I have to build a whole nother set of policies? Because now I'm going to have my entire organization almost like reading the same but separate policies, right? Like they kind of mirror each other, but they're different enough. And so you start going through all those logistical, like that logistical nightmare. Like, how do I actually build this out, right? And how do I use kind of that like those buzzwords? Like, how do I create synergy out of this, right? Like
ever evolving landscape. Yeah,
exactly.
Evolving landscape.
So when you're looking at building these programs and trying to find how to make them work, it really is. There's just a lot of like brainstorming that needs to happen.
Yep.
And I'll say that we were able to make it happen.
Yeah.
In 1 year, last year, Fusion Risk Management was able to obtain its 27001, 27701, and 42001 ISO framework certifications. We were able to really build one comprehensive management system, which is what I ended up calling it instead of going ISMS or PIMS or AIMS. It was and we were able to find all of those areas where we didn't have to duplicate work and create one comprehensive set of policies, one comprehensive set of procedures that were applicable to our management system, training, right? All the different requirements we're able to lock in and find all of the overlap, and then just create additional requirements when the framework asked for it, right? But I think it was, I hope I'm not making it sound super easy because it really wasn't, right? But
it's not that easy.
It took some work. But it was a lot of that same, we were talking all the time, Chris and I, right? Like it was almost daily conversations, Slack messages with the CyberData Pros team, trying to figure out how to work through some of this. And I can say confidently now, because I wasn't so confident when I had the mandate to go and build this mega management system. I can say confidently now that with the right partner, you can make it happen for sure.
Yeah.
And then Emily, from a certification body perspective, how different is it to show up in a situation where an organization has truly provided due care, due diligence to integrate a coherent management system versus having 3 or 4 separate silos effectively that may or may not be fully operationalized? What does that even look like for us?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's a great point to make with the way that you guys approached it. I will say, I think 42001 is unique in its own. And I think a lot of companies are scared to even approach it because it seems like a different world where I think you have the right partner that understands your environment and the way that your current management systems are working, if it's 27001 or 701. I think some people see it as, oh, I can just add AI into all my policies and I'll be covered. And it's like, no, it's not go find and replace or find and insert, right? It's take a little bit more than that. And I think that's the value of the partnership. And we can see that, right? And I think it is to have 3 separate management systems is not efficient for companies. I think it's one, to your point, having to go through and say, okay, look at this policy and this one just creates chaos. And so I think for us, we can really tell a difference when a company has spent time working with a partner to build out something that is applicable to the entire organization, but can still meet the requirements of, whatever standard you decide to bake into your company.
And then, Chris, as I think about this again from your perspective with some data pros, are there instances where a partner just isn't ready and you might have to shepherd multiple systems? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And, sometimes you have to be the bearer of bad news and be like, we're going to have to push this off a little bit, or we're going to have to, redefine the scope. I think maybe you're doing too much or doing too little. Let's redefine it. So I think it's nice to not get it from the auditor, have a major, or you got to go back because you don't have an ISMS or a policy, or you didn't implement something in your environment, so it's all about that. We're almost the middleman saying, hey, I don't think we should go in front of the auditor right now. I think we should, push back the audit. Fortunately, I didn't have to do that with Fusion. Fusion was like headstrong. The whole team was like, we are doing this and we are doing it now. And we're like, okay, we're along for the ride. So, yeah. So, but there are some clients that you have to be the bearer of bad news and be like, hey, we need to push this off for a year, or we need to push this off for a couple months because you guys are we're just not ready. We just don't have, maybe you have the policy in place, but you don't have the implementation in place in your environment.
Yep.
Right.
Which kind of brings
you
me
can have a policy template. And I started to cut you off, Patrick, but you can have a policy template and just be like, yeah, you can say insert Fusion RM or ABC company. That doesn't work. It doesn't work. And I think a lot of companies think that it's, checking the box. We're going to get ISO certified. We have the template. We can just get through the templates, and that it's got to be tailored to your organization. It really does.
Chris, what I was going to say,
give the guidance. Yeah. Go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you. Well, what I was going to say, ultimately, I hope to pose the same question to each of you to get your perspective, because the vast majority of our dialogue, we've talked about the importance of partnership, building trust, and the prep work that goes into ultimately earning certification. But then that leaves the question for our viewers, what does a certification assessment even look like? And so, Em, maybe if I could start with you and just a really generic explanation of what organizations should expect at assessment time, what the basic process might look like, and the basic milestones from our perspective that are critically important, the gate checks, if you will.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think this one's always hard to do in a condensed speech, so I'm going to do my best without going too far in. So typically for a customer that's never been through ISO, right, this is their first time, they're doing an initial certification. It starts with that stage one. And the stage one is really us coming in to say, do you have the foundational items there? This is mostly like internal audits, risk assessment, right? Those core things that if you don't have it, it's a red flag. And we know that there's things that are maybe missing or could lead to findings in the stage two. So that stage one, and again, sometimes we'll see clients that are not fully prepared come in, and it's always a little nerve-wracking from our end because we're like, oh gosh, okay, you're really not ready for this. And sometimes we have to pause and recommend a partner or whatnot. But once we get past the stage one, then we start looking at the stage two. And for the stage two, really what we're focusing on is going through, yes, we're checking all the clauses and the annex controls, but we're really looking at your statement of applicability for a company to understand, okay, what's in scope, what's not in scope. Mind you, the scope's already been determined, right? But we're focusing on your environment and the management system itself. So that stage two is really us making sure that you're going to be prepared when we come on site or do it remotely, depending on your environment, to go through the meetings. And in those meetings, it's not us trying to get you in any way. We just want to understand, how does your system work, and is it meeting all the requirements that we need? So you go through that, we call it field work, or the stage two audit. That's really what we're looking for. And then at the end and throughout it, we'll discuss any findings that come up, and those really are meant to be improvement items for you as you go on. They might be an OFI or a nonconformity, minor, major, whatever the case is. But once you finish that, then you need to allow yourself time to come up with your corrective action plans and, what that looks like to get to the certification. And I think, Chris, you might have said this, or Juan Carlos, you might have too, but what's hard for us is when a customer comes in and says, hey, I want to be certified in 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Always get very nervous because we tell them, look, you don't even know what your findings are going to be. You've got to build in time. Kind of assume that there might be some, there will be some, whatever the case is, that, it makes it very hard to give a defined timeline. So I think you have to kind of come into it knowing that it could be a range of timing from that perspective. Hopefully, Patrick, that answered it, but.
Yeah. And so Chris Z, as the readiness partner representing CyberData Pros, same question. What does the certification assessment look like for you?
I mean, for us, like on the client side of things, it's getting them audit ready for stage 1 and stage 2. And with those auditors, they like to throw a lot of evidence and screenshots and policies. They want to see everything. So stage 1 is all about policies and procedures and how you run things. And stage 2 is all about, how does it, okay, you have the policy. Now, how does it work? How did you implement it, right? So, and all the annex controls, right? So you have that. So can you repeat the question? I don't think I got.
Sure. As the
I'm sorry, I got off on a tangent.
There's a lot going on. But as an advisory partner, what does the certification assessment look like for you?
So yeah, that's right. So then, they use the platform, you guys Ascend, and they would give us, and we, Juan Carlos and I would get with different departments and different teams, and Juan Carlos would go to different departments and get different teams. And he wouldn't have the time to review evidence. He doesn't, because he has to go searching for the evidence. Hey, HR, I need this. Dev, I need development. I need this. IT, I need this. So he doesn't have the time, with his team right now to do all that. So we just said, okay, we're audit support now. Let's bring in the evidence. We'll review the evidence. We know what the auditor's looking for. We worked with A-LIGN for 7 years, which is nice with the partnership there. It builds trust because you know what we're all about, and we know what you guys are looking for in an audit. So with that, I mean, yeah.
Juan Carlos, same question. I mean, you've seen the CB's perspective, kind of the measure that you're being measured against. The readiness partner's perspective, as the customer, as the voice representing those watching us today, what is this experience like for you?
Yeah, I'll just refer back to an earlier point of mine, which is everyone wants to see you succeed.
Yeah.
Right. And so although it is a burdensome process, right? And there's no other way to put it, that is just what audit is. And that's okay, right? Because it's about thoroughness and making sure that you're actually doing what you say you're doing, right? You don't want to misrepresent to your own customers. So there is value in that thoroughness, right? But there is also value in having all of these different checks. Internal audit is saying, are you ready for your external audit? Are you ready to go in front of A-LIGN and make it represent that you're ready for this certification, whatever it may be. So you pass internal audit, then you go to stage 1. Stage 1 is just another check. Hey, are you actually ready for this, right? With a new and fresh perspective on your management system, or on the scope of your system, on the evidence you're providing, right? And then you finally get to stage 2, and once again, right, it's just another check. But it's built in a way that you succeed. And if at one of those points someone feels that you're not ready, just take the extra time to prepare yourself in your organization and get ready. There is no failure. You're never going to be able to do this again type. This is not that dire of a situation. You just need some extra time, right?
Yeah.
Can feel like that, right? If you ever find yourself in that situation, I know it can be daunting, but really it's just everyone wants to see you succeed. There's all these different checks to verify that you are able to succeed. And then practically, from my perspective, aside from having those checks, and from the customer perspective, it is just about the importance of your partnerships that you have with CyberData Pros or A-LIGN. It's just as important to carry those types of that type of trust and partnership internally within your organization.
Yeah.
Right. And what I mean by that, and something that I like to do is I like to have an audit kickoff call, right, with all the stakeholders, right? Everyone that falls within the scope of our ISO or our compliance program. And it's laying out, hey, this is exactly what the time, the schedule will look like. This is exactly what I'm going to ask of you over the next couple of months. There's going to be evidence gathering. There's going to be evidence review. It's very likely I might come back and say, hey, this doesn't quite fit what you provided doesn't quite meet the ask. And I'll sit with you. This is my full-time job. I will sit with you and I'll make sure that we get everything that we need to get and that it's done right. And then, come audit time, we're going to have interviews and I'll be there next to you, right? If you have a question, send me a text. We'll turn off our cameras. We'll ask for a minute and we can talk. And all of those things, right? It's both external and internal trust. I think my role, the way I see it, is a position of trust and letting people know that I also know what I'm doing and I can help everyone succeed as well.
Absolutely.
And so that I think is the most important thing from my perspective, aside from the go get evidence, go review evidence. It is a position of trust.
Yeah.
And Carlos, to that end, so again, trust, a function of character and competence. We actually have a question from the audience from Dallas Bischoff. Can you speak to the importance of having properly qualified, that is competent, internal auditors actually reviewing and ensuring that internal audit is both applicable and appropriate for you in the context of the organization? And maybe this is for both Juan Carlos and Chris Z.
Yeah, yes. I think people get in trouble because if you don't, and the reason why a lot of organizations use organizations like CyberData Pros is they're just not large enough to have a full-blown internal audit, right? I mean, you see that at Fortune 100 organizations, right? It's just they have the resources, they have the time, they have the money to have an internal audit department. And I think sometimes people get in trouble, or organizations get in trouble when they think that they can do it, right? And maybe they don't have the experience, and so they create this faux internal audit department for the sake of getting ready to go to audit, right? And it's a bunch of things, and that's probably where, Emily, you see, some people where you're like, you might need to go talk to these and see what they can do for you. And I think that really is the reason why you want to have a qualified, right, a competent internal auditor to help you. And the nice thing is, obviously for everyone here on this call, we're talking about CyberData Pros, and I've worked with them and they've been fantastic. But in reality, you can do your own, searching. And I would recommend, pick 2 or 3, talk to them. How do they, what's your success rate? What can you do for me to help me? Right. This is very important or critical for our organization to grow. And I think just probing a little bit will get you a good sense. Will give you a good sense of whether they are going to be somebody that you can trust.
Well, Carlos, what I love about that is, just as the scope and context of every organization is unique to them, so too will be the things that make partners good fits for them. And so I love your idea of not letting this just be cookie cutter. I'm using this person because this person did. Companies really have to take the time to, first of all, understand what it is they want to create. And then secondly, find partners they can work with that will share that vision. That really is the most important thing. Now, before we move away, Chris Z, You get a bad internal audit, an internal audit that clearly was performed by someone who wasn't competent to do so. I mean, what does it look like? Chris, maybe we start with you.
I mean, so of course, with the internal audit, and Juan Carlos hit the nail on the head, is that with the internal audit, you need an external auditor. I feel you need someone from the outside looking in, looking at your policies and procedures, because we're for CyberData Pros. So if you do the internal audit for your organization, you're doing it once a year. For us at CyberData Pros, we're doing it multiple times. We're doing it multiple times a day, and we know the standard. We try to know the standard inside and out. And when new things come up, we know. And I just feel like having an outside looking in and that experience that we have can bring and that non-bias person to the table helps out a lot, because I bet you right now we can find gaps, and even now, like with continual improvement, we're still going to find gaps today. I want to find a gap. I want to help you. I want to find a gap in an internal audit.
Yes.
I want to help you, because once you get to stage 1 to stage 2, and we have to go all the way back, we don't want to go all the way back. We want to succeed. I want to help you succeed. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think it is, we do see companies sometimes that they try to cut corners and do it, just kind of patchwork an internal audit, where I think if you take a step back, the internal audit is such a key indicator for a company of how they are conforming with, whether it's an ISO standard, but internal audit can be applicable to so many other frameworks too, that I think if companies really take the time to either, to your point, Juan Carlos, build out a team. And if you have the funds and the time to do that, great. But if you don't, I think having a partner to help you perform that internal audit is key, because they're not going to cut corners, right? And they are going to peel back every piece of it to say, okay, we know we're going to have issues here, maybe in the audit, or we know that we have time to fix it or remediate it, put controls in place, whatever the case is. That it really is such a foundational piece of it that having competent, which I feel like competent always sounds harsh, but it really is just having somebody that understands what they're doing, right? The standard, or just your company even, I think is a really important piece.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you so much. The question from the audience, which I think if you all are open to it, we'll transition to some of the questions we've gotten from the audience. So Dallas Bischoff, thank you. Supplied our first question. Next up, and Juan Carlos, I think this is probably for you. Was there anything you would have done differently in building your compliance program? Any lefts that you should have taken instead of rights? If you had it to do all over again?
I think when I've done this now long enough that I feel comfortable, not to sound super arrogant and full of myself, right? But I will say that where you want to spend the time is, when somebody brings that up in your organization, says, hey, I think it's about time, we want to expand our offering. We want to go, internationally. The ISO framework is respected internationally. Let's pursue that. I think what's important to do at that point is having those preliminary conversations. For example, like something easy you can do, go buy the standard yourself and read through it.
100%. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that is probably, like, you want to be familiar with the standard yourself. So go to the ISO website, buy whatever framework that your organization is looking to obtain, familiarize yourself with it, and you can even conduct your own gap assessment without even bringing in like even a partner. This is like preliminary work, right? You're just reading through it and you're like, okay, do we have an SDLC policy? No. Okay, so you're like, okay, I'm going to need that. You can kind of just create a chart. You go down the list of all the requirements and you just start familiarizing yourself with it. When I first started getting to this space, I was very fortunate to have an awesome boss / mentor who made me do that first day on the job. He's like, "You ever heard of ISO?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but never done any of it." And she was like, "Great, here you go. ISO 27001, read through it." And in the abstract, it's, you know, you're reading through it the first time, and in the abstract, you're like, "I don't really understand all of this stuff." It starts to get you start to piece it together, and you're like, "Oh, okay, it's about, information security within your organization, right?" Oh, and there's all these different requirements. Oh, and then the Annex A explains the, clauses 4 through 10, and you kind of start piecing all these things together. And but yeah, I think if you're serious about doing it, and you want to do, and if I could have done something differently, I guess, is spend more time familiarizing myself with all these different concepts. If it's the first time you're working with 27001, for example, and you don't know what a specific security term is, Google it, just so you understand what it's asking. Yeah. Spend the time studying and learning, and I think that will do wonders for you.
And Juan Carlos, the next question I think dovetails very nicely. It's essentially the same question but phrased differently, and that is, what advice or tips would you give to an org that's about to start this process? Completely naive to management system assessments, completely naive to management systems. Where does that organization start? And honestly, I think this could work for the group. So guys, feel free to answer as you see best.
Yeah. I like I mentioned, I think definitely get the standard. I think that's just before you go out and spend all this money and finding partners and paying auditors and this or that. Just familiarize yourself with the framework, what some of the requirements are, and then just do, like I said, a check of what the requirements are and are you doing it?
Yeah.
Right? I think some of it will be very evident to you if you're doing this for the first time, whether you're doing something or not. And then after that, you can start proactively talking, having those conversations. So second, it would be having those conversations with people who might need to be doing some things that aren't being done within your organization.
Which is a tough conversation to have.
Yeah. It is, because you're essentially going to somebody and saying, you might not be doing your job the completely correct way. Right? So there has to be some tact, right? And that's why I said it's a position of trust, because people have to trust that you know what you're talking about. And when you have that conversation, you have to be able to speak to whatever it is that you've identified as a gap authoritatively, but with like that soft power, right? Which is, hey, it's great. I'm going to help you throughout this process. Yep. I can be a project manager or whatever. You can offer whatever help you think they need. And then once you start doing some of that work, then I think that's when you start engaging and looking for that partner, right? You start having those conversations. Hey, Chris. Hey, CyberData Pros. I have this mandate. Need to go get ISO certified. This is the certification I'm working with. I've done some preliminary research. These are some of the gaps that we're working through. I think it's time that you all come in and help me take this to the next level.
Yep.
And I some of the steps how I would approach it.
Yeah, so Jim Collins has this idea that you should fire bullets before cannonballs. That is little risk before big risk. And what you just laid out exemplifies that as well as anything I've heard. Yeah. Emily, did I interrupt you? Were you going to say something?
No, other than Juan Carlos, I can't tell you how much we try to preach that to our clients of please have a standard, right? If you can start with the standard, and it's really, it always looks intimidating. I feel like when you get into the first few pages of it, but then as you start to dig, to your point, you can start to identify, do we even have this implemented? Do I know what this is? If not, research it. Yeah. But a lot of times I think companies just get overwhelmed by even having to get the standard and try to dig through it themselves. But that is such a critical piece that I really appreciate that statement.
Yes, and one thing I do want to say, for all who have ears to hear, we do not profit from ISO standard sales. CyberData Pros does not profit from ISO standard. It's the nature of the beast that ISO standards are hidden behind a paywall. So please don't be frustrated with us when we tell you actually have to go by the standard. It is what it is. There are very few that are publicly available. The vast majority do require some sort of remuneration in some way, shape, or form. Guys, we've got about 16 seconds left. So really quickly, Chris, Juan Carlos, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor and a privilege to do this with y'all.
Same, quite frankly. For our viewers, if you have questions for CyberData Pros, we'll get you in touch with Chris Z. If you have questions about how we run our audit practice, we'll get you in touch with Emily Schuckman. And Juan Carlos, I will not volunteer you, but should people have questions, maybe we could bring you into the conversation at some point. All right. To everyone that participated again, thank you for investing your time. We hope you found this worthwhile, and we look forward to seeing you again. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.